Hi guys, this is jsndon.com and I'm here with the famous Amazon Fire Phone. It was launched last summer and it stands out to the fact that it has 5 frontal cameras that are able to create a nice 3D-like effect. So this is the first Amazon phone. Usually they dabble in e-readers and tablets, but they tried and went ahead and created a smartphone. The Amazon Fire Phone costs $189 on Amazon right now. Usually this offer comes and goes. Last we heard it was $449, but now it's $189. So for that price it suddenly becomes more interesting. Originally it was about $600 or $700, so that's quite the price decrease. Let's talk about the design. So we're dealing here with a handset that's quite thick and bulky. For its diagonal, it has a 4.7-inch diagonal, it measures 8.9 millimeters in thickness, and it weighs 160 grams, which is huge for a 4.7-inch phone. It would be normal for a phablet, not for this device. It has a glass back, a glass front, obviously, and the back side kind of reminds me of the Nexus 4. It's a narrow and pocketable device, and since it's so compact, it offers a pretty good one-hand usage experience, as you can see right here. It has good grip in spite of the glass surface at the back, and it's a bit of a fingerprint magnet. It easily collects dust, cat hair, and obviously fingerprints at the back and at the front. We have a rubber-like texture on its sides. There's no microSD card slot here, and there is no removable battery and no pliable back cover. Let's see what's happening at the front. So we have 5 front cameras. There are 4 in each of the corners, one here, here, and here, plus the selfie one. These front cameras are used to create 3D effects and more stuff that you find out later on. We got the earpiece right here, the selfie camera near it, and a home button that I just pressed right here, a physical home button. Okay, I find the screen bezels to be quite big, even by 2014 standards. The back is rather flat, so the phone will sit nicely on a flat surface. And here we got the camera with a microphone next to it and the LED flash, and the placement of the camera makes it very easy to cover up when taking a picture, which is not nice. Okay, nothing else at the back. At the top we find the audio jack, a speaker, and the on-off button with reasonable feedback, while at the bottom we find 2 more speakers and the micro USB port. On the left there are the volume buttons that are a bit too flat and they don't offer good feedback, they're not comfy, and this extra button that triggers a feature called Firefly I will discuss later. Also here we can find the SIM tray, the nano SIM tray. Okay, so nothing on the right side, and if you touch the size of the phone, you'll see that the plastic is rather rough. This phone is made of plastic and of course glass, and if you look at the corners, you'll see that they're rounded and there are certain stripes here that feel like the plastic was not finished. So overall Amazon didn't exactly do a very fine job with the finishing here, which is a bit disappointing. Also, between the screen panel and the plastic edges, it's very easy to get dirt, dust, and other things. So bad finishing, not a very nice design, so we have objections here, especially for the weight of the phone. Now as far as the display is concerned, we got an IPS LCD here, so let's talk about the hardware a bit more. First of all, this 4.7-inch IPS LCD screen offers a resolution of 1280 over 720 pixels, and inside the phone you can find a quad-core Snapdragon 800 processor clocked at 2.2 GHz. The GPU is an Adreno 330 and we also have 2 GB of RAM. Now let's see what other hardware the Amazon Fire Phone brings. Other features include 32 GB of storage, and moving on to the cameras, we got a 13 megapixel back shooter with optical image stabilization and a front 2.1 megapixel camera. The sensors, well, that's a rich list. We got 4 infrared sensors in those corners, those cameras I mentioned. We got a gyroscope, we got an accelerometer, magnetometer, barometer, proximity sensor, and ambient light sensor. This model also offers GPS, it's got GLONASS, HSPA+, LTE in 9 bands, and it also comes with Wi-Fi, A, B, GN, AC, there's Bluetooth 3.0, NFC, we got a nano SIM card slot here, and there is micro USB 2.0 connectivity. Finally, there are dual stereo speakers here with Dolby Digital Plus technology. On the battery front, we're dealing here with 2400 mAh lithium-ion battery. On paper, it provides you with 22 hours of talk time and up to 285 hours of standby. The video playback time is up to 11 hours. And now in the test that we did, our test usually involves HD video playback in a loop with Wi-Fi on and brightness to 50%, and we achieved 7 hours and 10 minutes, which is reasonable but not more than that. At least we beat the HTC One M9 that scored 6 hours and 9 minutes, and we beat the Huawei P8 that scored 6 hours and 55 minutes. We also did a PCMark test. PCMark simulates continuous usage with a brightness level at 200 lux. Here we achieved 4 hours and 38 minutes, which is not impressive. We're above the HTC One M7 and Huawei Honor 6, but below the low-end phone Sony Xperia E4 that scored 5 hours and 52 minutes, so it totally beat us. The charging time here is 2 hours and 43 minutes, which is kind of mediocre, but at least it's better than the one of the Huawei P8 that's a few minutes longer. Still, we're below the OnePlus One that takes 1 hour and 15 minutes to charge. Overall, an unimpressive battery, and as far as I can tell, there are no power saving features. Now, as far as the music goes, we got this ultra minimalistic player with this ultra minimalistic user interface. It's basically all black and white. There is no equalizer and there are no impressive settings here as far as I can tell. You can also access the store anytime you want. So you can go to the libraries recently added, store is here, music store, new releases, bestsellers, and genre browsing. This is the settings area. You can download your purchases from your Amazon account, download on Wi-Fi, stream, and select the streaming cache size. Okay, now let's actually listen to the acoustic experience. Keep in mind that if you swipe to the left, you should be able to see new releases while you're playing a song. Let's try this in the player. So new releases as you're in the interface, and it's time to actually listen to the sound. Okay, and now some conclusions. We got a loud and clear experience, a crisp sound, and I like the way the high notes are heard on this handset. I want to mention that the bass is quite good here. There's no equalizer and no visualizer, sadly. There is an interesting aspect here. If you go to this area and you review your application in the carousel mode, you'll be recommended new releases instantly, even though you would like probably to see your own tunes. Anyway, good bass, good high notes, and that's pretty much the highlight. The headphones bundled here, well, they're a bit of a work of art. We got a flat, tangle-free wire, a pretty big remote, and these puppies here that go into your ear. They remind me of the Apple EarPods and of the Samsung Galaxy S6 headphones. Sadly, they're the kind of headphones that will fall from your ear because of their strange shape. The best thing they got going for them, this magnetic unification system that keeps them together at all time. Anyway, they're nice looking and they offer a loud, clear and crisp experience and a very good bass. As far as I can tell, there is no FM radio on this device, so you'll have to do with online radio. We obviously use the decibel meter here on this handset, and let's see what came out of that experience. The decibel meter showed us a value of 75.7 decibels on both speakers, with the phone at the back and the phone at the front, the same value of 75.7, which is a huge disappointment. 90% of the phones we test go over 80 decibels, so overall the acoustics here are good, but the device is not as loud as many other models, even lower end ones. If you aren't able to reach 80 decibels, well, that's a problem if you're supposed to be a modern smartphone. Now I want to discuss the screen. What you're seeing here is a pretty colorful display, an IPS LCD, a 4.7 incher with a resolution of 1280 over 720 pixels. We got a density of 315 ppi and 1000:1 contrast ratio. This model behaves quite well in sunlight, so the contrast is pretty much okay, and this is the instant video application that focuses on online content and less on the stuff you have on your device. If you go to personal videos, you'll basically be taken into the gallery as far as you can see right here. Okay, and it's time to actually check out a video sample and judge the screen. So the image is crisp, bright. We got vivid colors that are realistic and not oversaturated. We got wide viewing angles. And the pixels are of the RGB stripe kind. And now we put the lux meter to good use. And let's see what came out of that. Okay, so we go to photos. And then we select device. These are the pixels of the screen, RGB stripe pixels, and then this is the brightness level. We used the lux meter and measured 458 lux units, which is actually quite good. We're pretty close to the Samsung Galaxy S6 that achieves 475 lux. We beat the OnePlus One that scores 404 lux. We beat the HTC Desire 820 that scores 396 lux. Overall a good display, but we wanted a better resolution, especially since you can watch movies and play games on this crisp display, so could be better. Okay, so we go into the settings area. By the way, quite an ugly settings area. This is the display options part. You can adjust screen brightness, you can automatically rotate the screen, status bar can be hidden, set screen timeout, and then let's see what else. Turn off automatic screen rotation, show status bar, change them to sleep, share screen via Miracast, set default text size, and you can configure your motions and gestures. This involves the 4 frontal cameras. You can swivel, so if you swivel your wrist, you will open notifications and quick actions, sort of like this. That was the swiveling part, and the list continues. You can auto scroll, so if you're in the web browser, you want to scroll on a list, you do something like that and the list will scroll to the bottom or top. Then there's dynamic perspective, which is basically in a nutshell this 3D effect that you can play with. Then there's peek, with a slight tilt of a phone you can see additional information, auto scroll, and the applications where these come in handy, so that's pretty much it. Dynamic perspective and peek are basically those 3D features that we use so much on the phone. And as you can see with the tilt, you can view various information and access various areas on the device. Both options were present in the display area. So overall, once again, a good display, but the resolution is a bit of a letdown. Now, as far as the camera goes, this one here is a 13 megapixel shooter with optical image stabilization, f2.0 aperture, and a 5-element lens. It also has wide aperture and the LED flash. Okay, so now let's have a look at the camera interface. I'm going to bring this castle forward here and start up the camera. By the way, it takes quite some time to start up compared to modern smartphones. You can see that problem appearing. My finger will inevitably be in front of the camera most times, so I have to be careful not to put my finger here. Of course, I can hold the device like this, but it doesn't feel natural anyway. Let's handle this and check out the interface. Minimalistic, just like the music player. We got flash options here, front camera shortcut, and the settings area that's very limited if you ask me. We got HDR, off, on or auto, image review, best shot, and the camera modes that are lenticular and panorama. Panorama speaks for itself, while lenticular is basically a way of taking moving pictures. You can take a picture like this, like I'm doing right now. Take one shot, another one, and another one. So you can create a lenticular image that can be viewed by tilting your device to get that cool 3D view. You'll see that later on. Okay, so let's get back here. On the right side of the screen, we got the camera modes, filming and photo taking. We got the shutter button and gallery shortcut. Okay, I have to mention that at sometimes the camera will suggest to you to use HDR if need be. And other stuff we're mentioning here, well, if you go to the video mode, surprisingly there are no video options, so basically you should be filming full HD the whole time. As far as the actual camera experience goes, the focus is kind of slow. If you keep the screen pressed, you can activate the auto exposure and autofocus lock, and the zoom is quite fluid. You can go up to 6x pretty fast, and capture is also pretty fast, as you can see right here. The focus was slow, but at least the capture is fast. So let's have a look at what we took here. It's a picture of this castle. The level of detail is, I would say, quite good, but this small screen makes everything look good. Okay, so it's time to go to the gallery. I have to mention from the start that we took those shots in the mountains on a pretty cloudy afternoon. Now let's see those samples that I was talking about. So as I said, they were taken in the mountains on a cloudy afternoon, and we got quite a few of them. So first things I noticed was that the color choice was quite good, so good colors, an okay level of details. Sometimes the pictures came out overexposed in spite of it being a cloudy day. This one, for example, is too bright for the actual scenery. The camera was trying to compensate for the cloudy conditions, and this is what came out. I also noticed that the macros were quite good. This is only the first attempt at a macro with good details, but we also tried macros out with some flowers. The first example, looking pretty nicely. And then we tried a bit of HDR action that looked pretty decent. It lighted up the scenery, and I have to say that the colors are pretty realistic as far as this camera goes, and once again, new attempt at a macro and a pretty successful one. Next up, this is what happens, the overexposition I was talking about before. Once again, a bit too bright, and this is a zoom test, a regular picture, and then we start zooming in once, twice, 3 times, and the image remains relatively crisp. We also have a pretty good texture, and this is an attempt at a selfie, and this selfie was quite blurry in my view. Another attempt at a macro, and if I'm not mistaken, one of these pictures is actually the one that involves the lenticular feature. So in case you were wondering about lenticular, this is what it's all about. You take a shot and then you can view it with the special dynamic perspective I mentioned before. More shots of flowers, and again, strange exposure here, pretty good macro, a very nice red, and another HDR that strangely darkens the picture instead of lighting it up, which I find to be pretty strange. Okay, a bit of strange focusing on these tulips, and yet again, the dynamic perspective strikes again, this time better than the previous one. It's a gimmick, but some people may like this thing. And that's what I was talking about, very strange exposure and focus for these tulips. Of course it was cloudy, but how cloudy can it be so that the camera cannot capture light well at all? And this is actually a pretty nice sample because you can actually see the raindrops on the flower, which is quite a performance for this camera. So if you want macros and crisp pictures and good colors, the Amazon Fire Phone solves that problem for you. However, sometimes it faces strange exposure, and it's certainly not exactly a good camera when it comes to low light conditions. The panorama is quite wide, taken pretty fast, no artifacts, but the level of detail doesn't exactly impress me. For a phone that pretends to be a flagship of sorts, we got quite a few blurry shots and shots with focus problems, so that's a problem for Amazon. The selfies are kind of blurry, which was to be expected, and some more shots here of a cat with details, some statues. Some of these pictures look good on the handset, but when you view them on the PC, they're a bit disappointing. The conclusion, the lenticular thing is a gimmick, the colors are good, macros are good, however the overall experience is a letdown if you are expecting a flagship experience. Now, if you want to see some videos, let's see what we got here. So the videos are usually taken in full HD, MP4 files, 30 frames per second, 20 mega per second bitrate, poor stabilization and okay colors. So video number 1. Quite loud, as you can hear. So this is the video in which we got poor stabilization, a pretty crisp image, good colors, a pretty decent exposure change and some focus loss. Okay, then we get to the second video where we experience good acoustics, some focus loss, and a serious quality drop when zooming in. Of course, this is a 720p screen, but if you view the video on the PC and even on YouTube, you'll see that the quality drops dramatically when zooming in. There's lots and lots of focus loss. The camera seems to continuously try to refocus, and that's bothersome. Okay, then we got video number 3. That should be here somewhere. Once again, a pair of dogs. Yet again, focus problems. However, good details, good colors, and pretty poor stabilization since this time we're actually moving. Okay, next video. This is where things get really messy because you have a poor exposure change. However, the colors are quite decent. It was a cloudy day and with patches of sun, but this cannot be justified. Exaggeratedly bright and then back to normal. Okay, and one last video. This one here, let's check it out. It's a bit shaky from the start. At least the exposure is okay, the colors look good, and the level of detail is decent. I would compare the performance of this camera to the iPhone 5S if you really want a term of comparison. It's certainly not at the same level with the 2014 flagship, and I said 2014, not 15 obviously. It's miles away from the Samsung Galaxy S5 if you want to compare it to 2014 phone. I would call the pictures reasonable for the price tag of this model, but the video not. I've seen better videos coming from mid-range phones, and that's not a compliment for this phone. There's too much focus loss and too much refocusing during the videos, and the lenticular thing remains only a gimmick. If you want to do some editing, you get to the picture, press this virtual button and you got enhance, crop, orientation, red eye effects, stickers, text, meme, draw, brightness, contrast, saturation, warmth, blemish, focus, splash. So a ton of options, including the cute meme thing that may be fun for some people. Okay, so enough about the camera. Overall, it's generating decent pictures but not so good video. We go to performance, and as far as the performance is concerned, this device was able to reach a temperature of 38.6 degrees Celsius after playing 15 minutes of a game with 3D graphics. So there is no overheating here, but the phone gets a bit warm after playing games for a while. As far as web browsing is concerned, we're using the Silk browser that was made famous by the Amazon tablets. Okay, so let's get things going. This is the web browser, the Silk browser, and let's access gsndom.com. I would call it reasonably fast, not the fastest browser in the world. We got the auto scroll thing going on, courtesy of the front cameras, and it's working quite fine. However, the options feel a bit antique to me. They have a vibe that reminds me of Opera, and Opera is a lower end browser, so that's not a compliment for Amazon. We got these floating options here, the back and forward, as well as the tab option. They also feel a bit old compared to the modern expectations from a browser. You can also use private browsing, and the virtual keyboard is quite comfy and well spaced. Now, if you want to discuss the actual phone calling and other things like that, this is the dialer, and you also got a voicemail feature, history, contacts. I have to say we got good call quality, loud experience, and a good signal, so nothing to object about here. Now we go back to the photos, and we're going to discuss the benchmarks. In order to do that, I'm going to enter the benchmark area and start comparing this phone to other devices. Okay, so I compared the Amazon Fire phone to the Samsung Galaxy S5 and the iPhone 6, two of the standout models from last year. So in quadrant, we scored 19,797 points on the Fire phone, while the Galaxy S5 had 22,739. Next up, there should be Antutu. In Antutu, we scored a very good score, 42,093. We beat the Galaxy S5 by about 8,000 points, and the iPhone 6 beat us by about 6,000 points. Nanomark brought us a result of 59.7 frames per second. Galaxy S5 had 60.1 frames per second. And in case you're wondering, this model comes with a Snapdragon 800 processor and 2GB of RAM, Galaxy S5 Snapdragon 801 2GB of RAM, and the iPhone 6 an Apple A8 processor and 1GB of RAM. We continue with the benchmarks. This is Velamo, and this is the metal test with a score of 14 points. It's better than the one of the Galaxy S5 that achieves 1186. 3D Mark is also here with a huge score of 18,279 in the iStorm Unlimited test, while the Galaxy S5 18,632. Finally, the iPhone 6 17,389. Geekbench 3, well, in this test we scored 881 in the single-core test and 2642 in the multi-core test. Galaxy S5 scored 854 over 2553. Finally, the iPhone 6 scored 1629 over 2923, so it certainly beat us. GFX is also here with a score of 23 frames per second in the TRX off-screen 1080p test, while the Galaxy S5 had 27.4 in the same test and the iPhone 6 42.8 in the same test. Obviously, we tried the test that involves speed. This is speed test. We achieved 20 megapsecond in download and 20 in upload. Galaxy S5 had 23 and 24, and iPhone 6 28 and 21, so certainly better. We go back to our folders and we check out browser mark, where we scored 1285 on the Fire phone and the Galaxy S5 had 3250. There's obviously some spider in the mix as well, with a decent score of 954, while the Galaxy S5 had 413 and iPhone 6 359. The lower the better, so those are actually better. There's also Basemark X with a good score of 22,035 points. The Galaxy S5 had 23,000 and the iPhone 6 21,200. So overall, we're only able to win 1 out of the 11 battles in front of the iPhone 6, and we win 3 out of the 11 battles in front of the Galaxy S5. The results are quite good for a Snapdragon 800 phone with only an HD screen attached to it, and obviously there's no lag in the interface. You're using gestures as well to complement your movements, so once again no lag, and obviously all games that are found in the Amazon App Store are able to run just fine, including this game that has 3D graphics and can be used as a bit of a benchmark. Usually we rely on Riptide GP2, but this is just as good and available for free. Here we go, 3D graphics, dynamic lighting and all the cool looking things. Let's turn up the volume. The water effects are already here. That fire effect was pretty cool. Speed sensation is okay. This is exactly our Riptide GP. It can serve as a benchmark game. The destructible environments look nice. So as far as gaming goes, you're covered, and the Amazon Fire phone is good for any title you can find in the Amazon App Store, and there are plenty of them, including 60 or more games optimized for that cool dynamic view effect you can play with. So the conclusion, no lag, and we can run new games without a hassle. Now I want to talk about the software because it's very interesting. This is called Fire OS. It's based on Android, and as you can see, there is a carousel here showing us the latest apps we've played with. The carousel not only shows the latest apps but also makes suggestions regarding other apps we can download or play with, regarding other similar pictures, recent calls, pages to access, and if you recently listened to music or watched a movie, you obviously get recommendations for that aspect. This lag-free interface involves a dock area, this one here, that includes the phone, messaging, email and Silk browser, and even if you go to the carousel, do this or keep swiping, the dock will be present there. However, if I keep swiping to the bottom, it disappears, so it's not exactly ever present, but it remains here overall. You can choose to see stuff on your device or in the cloud, so the apps you download will also be stored in the cloud for later use, maybe on other devices. All the apps are placed on the home screen as shown right here, and if you double tap home, This is the multitasking area. It's called quick switch and allows you to close app simply by swiping up, and obviously also opens up the dock as shown right there. That was the double tap of the home button, and if you keep home pressed, you will trigger a virtual assistant that's mediocre or about that. Who was Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs was an American entrepreneur, marketer, and inventor who was the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Apple Incorporated.
This assistant is also able to place calls, send and write emails, do web searches, and it's a bit rudimentary in my view. For example, if you ask it the weather, it doesn't know what to tell you. If you swipe to the bottom, you'll find the quick settings and notification area, looking pretty basic with a few connectivity options, search and a flashlight. Okay, if you swipe up, once you're inside an app, you're going to close it like I just did. We're closing it again. So swiping up is usually a method to close an application. If you're in the home screen and you swipe to the right, let's try this again. You can find the sections that will divide the content on your device: apps, games, web, photos, books, newsstand, audiobooks, docs, and shop. And if you're swiping to the right, you can find some cards like the one showing weather, emails, and things like that. Okay, and let's see what happens if you're inside an application, for example, the weather. If you swipe right, you can find its sections. For example, if you're in the gallery, the photo gallery, you can see the folders of your pictures. That's only one example. And if you swipe to the left, you can find your daily view. And if it's a more content-based application, it can send you recommendations of various, I don't know, music or movies. For example, the music player, this is the organization with the right swipe, and the left swipe shows you recommendation of music. So those are the controls of the interface. It's all swipes, pretty intuitive ones. This is a simple UI that's very fluid and it's a bit 3D. If you look at the icons, you'll see that they're shifting to the left or right as you're tilting the phone. Speaking of tilting, there are some unique aspects here. There's something called dynamic perspective. This goes like this. This is the dynamic perspective as seen in the lock screen. Basically, I'm tilting the phone and seeing more content that's behind the scenes, and I can do the same thing with maps. Dynamic perspective applies an extra 3D layer on a variety of features. So this is Berlin, and if you want to see something like a monument or building, you can tilt the phone and enjoy the 3D view of a variety of monuments and buildings. So if you want to write London, for example, that's London, and once you start zooming in, the landmarks will appear and you can see them in full 3D glory. That's another aspect of the dynamic perspective. Obviously, the icons also in 3D, and this also helps you to interact with the device. Tilting it would trigger some of the options, and also doing something like this should offer me access to the quick settings area. Usually it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, you get the idea. Tilting offers you access to a variety of features, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Usually it works. You should also know that there are over 60 games with 3D effects in the Amazon App Store if you want to play with them. Then there's something called Firefly. I mentioned before, there's a dedicated button here. It's also the regular camera button. You press it, you trigger the camera, which seems to be taking quite a bit. Let's try this again. You press it to trigger the camera, but if you keep it pressed for a longer time, you trigger something called Firefly. Well, Firefly is able to identify content and products. I have this game right here. Should be able to tell me everything about it. Okay, it recognized the artwork. Let's turn it to the back. See if you recognize the company, the game, things like that. It recognized the code. So that's nice. Apparently Nintendo, but it's not Nintendo. Anyway, it creates a clipboard of the things I've recently found. You can find music, you can also find TV shows, point it at the TV and you'll be all set. And once you find the product, you can go to the Amazon store and start buying it from there. You can find phone numbers, addresses, product codes, TV shows, movies, songs, and I have to say I was impressed by how fast it found the songs, so that's quite nice. Sometimes it's a bit hit and miss with hardware products like keyboards and mice, but nothing is perfect nowadays. Okay, another interesting feature is called Mayday. It's accessible here. If you have an elderly parent or some person who doesn't handle technology, well, with Mayday you can get in touch with the Amazon support in about 15 seconds and they'll help you set up everything. This phone also allows you to sideload Android applications via APKs, and sadly the apps based on Google will not work because the services will crash. The Google Play services tend to crash, so no Gmail for you, and obviously no other applications like the Play Store, Playbooks, Play Games, Google Plus, also Hangouts, and even Dropbox is missing, at least from the Amazon App Store. However, people have already started tweaking the experience. People have been installing launchers and other things to make the interface seem more Android-like. You can install a custom launcher if you want to, but if you want the pure Amazon experience, you probably stick with this one. As far as the settings go, I bet you're curious, it's a hugely minimalistic experience. It's all black and white, and once you tap a setting, you'll open up a series of sub-options that will show you what you need. An interesting feature to mention here, parental controls. So if you don't want the little ones to access improper stuff, this is where you set that up. Now we're off to the section where we analyze the pre-installed applications. They're pretty basic. We got a calendar, minimalistic right here. We got maps. As far as I know, it's powered by Nokia here, so it's quite accurate, has great 3D graphics and looks nice. Closing it up with a swipe up. Okay, we got contacts, we got weather. As you can see, this swiping is a hit and miss, just like the tilt gestures. We continue the list of pre-installed applications with camera, photos, Firefly, clock. There's Shop Amazon, where you basically shop from the basic Amazon portal. You can shop for books, hardware, and anything you want. There's the App Store. Here you can download your applications. Once again, I find the lack of Dropbox to be surprising. At least there's Facebook. We got games here, a separate selection for your games and for the game store. Not the fastest loading apps in the world, as you can see. Not fast at all, obviously. Previously I was praising the phone for its lack of lag. Well, no longer. And anyway, we also have the camera, photos, Firefly, clock. We got App Store and games, instant video, music, Kindle, where you get your books, with a store section and the device section, and also not a very fast experience. And basically the same experience this time with magazines. It's called Newsstand and offers you publications. The gray background and the tiles here, you're familiar with them from the Amazon tablets. Then come the audiobooks. There's a notes application, very basic, allowing you to create text notes, include photos and audio if need be. There's also calculator settings. There's something called Docs. It allows you to play with doc, XLS and PowerPoint files and transfer them via USB. There's a wallet. I wish this phone had the fingerprint scanner. It would have been very useful to pay for stuff much easily, but Amazon didn't find a need to implement it. There's Fire Quick Start and a few games to play with, including Monkey Body, that involves the front cameras and offers a tilting perspective. It's actually very fun to play with and a bit addictive. The kids will love it. So this cute little monkey can be interacted with. You can spin it. It will get dizzy. You can pound the bongos. You can ask him to take a picture of you. And guess what? He actually took the picture. He's looking at it and put a heart on it. Okay. You can press this to get clues, and anyway, this is the cute Monkey Body application and somehow we were asked if we wanted to exit, although other apps didn't show that. Anyway, it's time for the verdict. This is the Amazon Fire Phone. It's a bit of a hit and miss for Amazon, and we got the pros and cons right here. On the pro side, the camera at the back is okay for picture taking, the kind of pictures you post on Facebook, but not professional pictures. It's far from the level of a Samsung Galaxy S5, for example. It takes good macros, and that's about it. We got good headphones bundled with the device. We got a pretty good display, that's bright. There's no overheating here. We got good benchmarks and a pretty good gaming experience. Comfy user interface with all the swipe and tilting. I'd say it's pretty comfy to get around. Firefly is a good idea, but it has to be developed more. And now on the negative side of things, it's a big and heavy phone for a 4.7 incher. The front cameras are gimmicky, and the whole dynamic perspective is also gimmicky. The battery is not exactly impressive. The phone is not very loud, speaker-wise. The lenticular thing is also a gimmick. Video capture was unimpressive in my book. And the lack of Google Apps is also a bit of a letdown. The lack of support for Dropbox also strange. And the bad finishing of the corners and some of the design aspects were a letdown as well. So the Amazon Fire Phone gets from gsm.com a 7 for design, 7.5 for hardware, and an 8.3 for OS and UI. The final grade is 7.6 out of 10 here at gsm.com. Frankly speaking, this phone is very gimmicky. It's filled with things that are unnecessary. Basically, they're experimental features, and the experiment is at the cost of the user, which doesn't exactly feel nice. Luckily, you can deactivate some of these aspects, and in the end, people who bought the phone probably don't even use them unless they want to show their friends these options. It's a big and massive phone. It doesn't have Google Apps. It consumes media well. It produces decent pictures and macros. It's okay for gaming, but that's as far as it goes. There's no clear selling point here, unless you count the front cameras, which we don't like to count because they're gimmicky. So 7.6 out of 10 from gsm.com for the Fire Phone. Bye bye.